everyone. It's so good to see you. I'm Karen Hackett with the Office of Alumni Engagement. I know a lot of you spoke with my colleague, Caitlin Spooner, and so we welcome you here tonight to Montclair State University. It's so good to see so many alumni from different class years represented, and I want to let you know you are part of a powerful group of, get this, 130,000 alumni. So they are represented in every profession, across all 50 states, and worldwide. So we encourage you to stay connected, follow us on social, join our online community through Montclair Connect, and you'll receive links if you haven't already in a thank you email that you'll receive following this event. So enjoy this evening, and thank you again for coming out. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. How's everyone doing? So my name is Jen Rogers. I'm the other half of Turning Leaf Career Consulting. Andrea is stuck in traffic, in Jersey traffic, so she'll be here when she's here, whatever way says she gets here. So what I thought I would do is just briefly introduce myself, tell you a little bit about our company. And then I'm not going, this isn't a large group, but it's big enough where if we had everyone sort of introduce themselves and tell the story, it would take a long time. But I do want to get a sense of what some of you hope to get out of this evening's workshop. But a little bit about me. We were talking earlier about when we went to college, and when I was an undergrad, there was no internet. I had my first email, my second job out of college. And so when I graduated college, I had no idea what it was that I wanted to do. My best friend had gotten a job, and I very quickly, upon graduating, and I asked her how she got her job, and she said, look in the Sunday paper under college grad. And so that's what I did. And I lucked out. I got a job working in a staffing company. And I started out placing individuals in temporary and permanent placement. I then was recruited into a .com, and I worked as an experienced hire, technical recruiter, and a campus recruiter. And then once that .com went out of business, I then transitioned over to a consulting company, and then also did experienced hiring for another organization while I went to grad school part-time in the evening to get my master's in counseling and personnel services. So I made a career transition from recruiting / HR to career counseling. And so I've been working in career counseling since 2002. I've worked at a handful of public and private universities. I currently work part-time at one public university. In addition, I work part-time with Andrea with Turning Leaf Career Consulting. And what we do is we do these workshops. We also have created and run career transition / reentry groups, very structured 12-hour groups, job search strategy groups, and we also work with clients one-on-one on really anything from I'm in a transition reentering, I don't know what I want to do, recent college grads, individuals who are looking to leave where they're currently working and trying to identify where to go next. We also help out with interview prep and resume development. So that's a little bit about us and me, and Andrea's background is very similar. She started out working in HR and then transitioned into career counseling. So I'm wondering what brings you here. We have a little over an hour together. We're going to be talking about personal brand. So we have some goals for ourselves in terms of the workshop we have, and I know you can see it there in that little packet, but what brought you here? What are some of the one or two things that you want to walk away with? Yes.
Really understanding what a personal brand is. I've done a lot of research online, but when I don't really get it, I love it when a person tells me face to face, this is what it is.
Okay, thank you. What else?
I think I saw something about branding a personal statement in the resume.
Right.
So I want to be on track to have
Right.
one of those.
Yeah.
Make sure my resume is set up for
Yes. And so, so if you didn't hear, your name, I'm sorry. Elaine mentioned a personal statement and something to how to craft something like that for your resume. So we are not going to be working on personal pitches this evening. However, the exercises that we have will help you start thinking about the message you want to send based on where you are and who you're talking to. But certainly, when you have a certain number of years of work experience, whether you're looking to go into something very related to what you're doing or make that transition, you want to have a summary statement or profile on the top of your resume that reflects your personality and who you are and what you're looking to do. What else? What is it that you? Yes.
Maybe branding yourself. Myself, I'm a teacher, so in about 5 years I'm going to retire. And I need that transition. So I'm not an interview or just working part-time.
Yeah.
There's talking about yourself. I don't want to be in education, so I'm thinking, maybe that's right. The positive
Yeah, the
aspects.
attributes, yeah. Were you in one of our other workshops?
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess trying to brand myself to transition into actually my old field.
Okay.
But the problem is being, time away. Still having all the skills and using it in my, other, experiences,
Mhm.
but being overqualified. So not wanting to pay, to bring in someone overqualified,
Right.
and then having too much time away. Catch
Mhm.
22. And trying to resolve that problem.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yes.
So I'm trying to change, not complete fields, but I'm trying to get out of one position into another.
Mhm.
And I don't know if I'm pigeonholed or, I have a great reputation in my current position, which I think is keeping me stuck there.
Yeah.
And I want to move to another.
Yeah. They know they have a good thing when you see it, and they don't let you go, kind of thing. Or
Yeah.
yeah,
And then, so I'm looking for a new position
within the organization.
within the organization, but then also, how much experience do you put before,
Right.
I was realizing, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going way back with my experience, I might want to cut that,
Right. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I want to make sure that my brand is clearly identifiable to my target audience.
Yep. And anyone looking to, there was a lot of, kind of working on yourself and your own personal brand, but anyone looking to also expand that to perhaps an organization that they have?
So I changed careers about 3 years ago.
Mhm.
I'm a small business now. Completely changed, completely different.
Mhm.
I'm trying to get branding the business, branding specifically what I do. I think I have a unique niche in my area, but I'm having a hard time kind of getting the word out and getting
Yeah.
myself.
And it's your own business,
Yes.
so you are the brand.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Just like this young woman over here, I'm also trying to sort of combine some skill sets. So I work here at Montclair State University. I'm in IT, and I've been here for 17 years. It's a good thing, but I also have another interest in environmental sustainable methods, which is what I got my master's in. So I've sat on commissions and blah, 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 and I've done some sustainable IT stuff. But I want to be able to sort of make a brand, create a brand that combines the two, IT and this other area. I don't maybe plan to stay here forever, so, and I just find it very hard to write a resume, how do I state that?
Yeah.
So I think this is.
Yeah. And it's always easier for us to look at other people and say, well, come on, this is what you should say, or this is what I see in you, right? But it's so hard for ourselves to kind of find out within us and talk about ourselves in a way that's compelling. So we're going to get to all these things in the time that we have. So let's make sure. Okay. So these are our goals. This one little slide is not on your handout. We're going to define brand and branding. There is a slight difference. We are going to talk about how to identify the attributes of one's brand. So that could be your own personal brand, your company's brand, but identifying the nuances. What makes it up? What makes your brand unique and different? We're also going to talk about how to identify the market for your brand. So once you sort of know who you are and what you stand for, how do you go about letting others know about you? And at the same time, who do you let know about you? Because if you are, if you're not preaching to the right choir, it really doesn't matter what you're saying, they're not going to listen. So you need to start thinking about yourself as almost like a product, right? And again, how to promote your brand, what channels and resources to use for that. There's actually a website called the Dictionary of Brand, and it's a person's perception of a product, service, experience, or organization. So we have some images up here, some brands, and there are no words, right, just images. And you all recognize what those things are? Right, they don't have to say anything. You see it and you know what it stands for, or perhaps it evokes a feeling because you had an experience using it or being there, right? So when you see Mickey Mouse, what are your thoughts? What comes to mind? Happy vacations, happy joy, yeah. Excellence, yeah. And let's go for another one. When you see the Eiffel Tower, what do you think? Romance, yeah. What else? Travel, Paris, yeah. So, and we put the Eiffel Tower there for a specific reason because, these are all companies and they all have brands, but places can brand themselves, right? That's why if you're traveling, every city has some sort of tourism site, right, to promote themselves, and they brand themselves in a certain way. And how did the thoughts that came to mind, how did those thoughts develop? How did you get that feeling? What experience? Past experiences, right? Experience. And so whether you were there physically or through the messaging that you received, or through others telling you about the products that they've used or the places they've been. So that messaging. Okay, so I'm going to ask for a volunteer because I don't want to be talking the whole time. So if someone could read the first sentence, I know we don't have any periods here, but if someone could read the one that starts with personal brand. Yes.
Personal brand is rooted in the minds of people in the market.
And what about personal branding? Read that.
Personal branding is the effort to communicate and present your value to the world.
Okay. So personal brand is rooted in the minds of people in the market. So it's what people are thinking. The branding is what you're putting out there, right? So it's the perception of others and what you're putting out there. You can read a true personal brand.
A true personal brand revolves around what others say about you.
Mm-hmm. And personal branding revolves around what you say about yourself. And so it's very important to think about the fact that your brand is a constant. It's evolving and it's always there. Now, I'm not saying you can't let loose when you go to Paris and have fun and become, your personal self. That's fine. But always remember your space and where you are. And what you say about yourself. And so it's creating that consistent message that's flexible but the same, depending on your audience. So it can be a little tricky, right? A true personal brand revolves around what other people say about you. So testimonials. So if you are walking the walk of what you say, then other people are going to be talking the talk about who you are. So it's matching that. And the key here is, and I saw a quote today, and it was actually a quote by Kurt Cobain. But I don't remember it verbatim, but essentially the long and short of it was, he said, so many people try to be someone else when they should just be being who they are. And I think so many times we go to places or we're in environments where we see other people and we assume that they have all their stuff together and they are set and they know. And a lot of it is about not faking it, but portraying the image of who you really are to others in a way that's confident and professional. And so it's not about putting on a persona because you think that's what people want. It's engaging in activities and providing services and having a personality that reflects who you are. And that's important to then thinking of when we think about later on, who's going to want to sort of meet you. need to, where's that match? So the first thing that you want to do when, and this is something, I mentioned Andrea and I are both career counselors, and whenever it was sort of drilled into our heads in grad school, and it's something that we do with our clients is, in any situation, is really either a full self-assessment of ourselves or a mini self-assessment depending on where you are and what your needs are. But it's important to know who you are. Remember I mentioned you are the product, and so if you don't know what you're promoting, you're going to be lost. And so you need to start with you. And so if you own your own business, or you have a small business or a medium business, it's not only identifying what your business stands for, but the people who are in the business, what makes up that organization. What do the people who work in that organization, what are the skills, what's the personality, what are the resources that that organization can provide. But if we go from an individual perspective, we first look at our values, what's important to us. Values to change over time. What was important to us maybe 15, 20 years ago is not necessarily as important to us now. And we know that we can't have everything in life, but there are certain core values that may shift and ebb and flow, but certain core values that we have that sort of guide us, our guiding principles. And there are work-life values. So for some of us, it's more of I need to get my business going, so I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of my life right now to get the work going. And for others, we're making a transition because we want more of a life. Or perhaps our job is stressing us out so much that we still want to work hard, but we want to do it in a way that brings us joy. And so that's a value. Causes. So what's important to you? For me, what's important to me is walking out of a building at the end of the day, or walking out of some place at the end of the day and thinking I made a difference in someone else's life in some small way. I helped someone in some small way. And so for others it may be, in terms of causes, animals or education or the environment. And so what is important to you? Maybe there are a handful of things that are important to you, and that's okay too, but it's important to stop on that. And what impact do you want to have on your clients, on your life, and what comes first? And so we have an exercise for you. It's a quick and dirty exercise. We have much longer values exercises. We actually have a values game that we play with people as well, but we don't have time for that. But what I would like for you to do is take a look at this value scale just to get you thinking about things. Read through it, and then there should be 14 here. So assign a rank of 1 to the most important value and a rank of 14 to the least important value. You might want to put some numbers to the right first and then kind of pick and choose what's most important. So it's forcing you to choose. So take a couple minutes to work on that. All right. So how is that? How is being forced to choose what's most important?
It puts everything in perspective.
Yeah, in what way?
What you thought was important really isn't that important. I think as I've gotten older, I have different priorities now.
Yep.
I've thought about what a career should be, what a job should entail, and what you want to get out of it.
That's right. What else? And I think that's the whole what you want to get out of it, what's important to you. That's part of your messaging, right? So if someone says, "Tell me about yourself," or if someone says, "Why should we go with your business?" to be able to speak with real emotion and feeling about what is important to you, why you want to do this work, why you want to offer this service, why you think that you're the best choice, to be able to really feel deeply about that, or somewhat deeply about that, makes all the difference. Because people can tell when you're being genuine. People can tell when you really feel for something. So in terms of the values, it is that sort of, what do you want out of your work, what do you want out of your life, and how do you want to serve? How do you want to serve the public or your role? Okay, so I would continue that process. Online, there are a number of quick and dirty, values scales. What I would encourage you to do is kind of perhaps even go through some of your work and volunteer experiences and identify the things that were sort of like a positive, and things that you didn't love so much and why. because a lot of times that can speak to sort of what was a good match for you in terms of your core values. So Andrea made it.
Hello.
So I briefly introduced myself, and I said we have similar backgrounds. I said you were stuck in Jersey traffic, so everyone empathized. Okay. Do you want to say a couple words? Do you want to keep on?
No, we'll keep on going.
Keep on trucking? Okay. Do you want to start?
Sure. So what other, when taking a step back, the other very important piece is what are your interests? It sounds obvious, but what drives you, what motivates you, and these are, you may not have the skill sets yet. Those are things that can be acquired, but what you're interested in is really an important piece to identify through this process.
And one of the things, that last piece, what motivates you, is again, thinking back on your experiences, both volunteer, and you were talking about that, right? Things you've been doing recently, both volunteer or even, you might even consider a volunteer thing, maybe it was something you were doing in your community, but it wasn't officially a volunteer role, and things you've done for pay in your work life that you really enjoyed. He actually was Montclair. He went here for some extra classes. Andrea and I ran a workshop, I think it was a resume workshop years ago, and this gentleman from Montclair was looking to build his resume, and the work he had been doing, I don't even remember what it was, but what really interested him was all the work and all the activities he engaged in as part of sort of like a committee at his job. That wasn't even part of his job description. And his committee was all about like sustainability and the environment, and so he would put together these team building activities outside. He did these they would go to Western Jersey and go to the woods, and he loved all of that. And so, he realized I need to be doing something that's more involved with sort of team building, environment, that kind of thing. So thinking about what really gets you going. I tell this story sometimes, sometimes it's a little bit morbid, sometimes it's not. But when I read the New York Times on a Sunday, there are three places I love going, but two of them, one is the wedding announcements, and one is the obituaries. And it's because I like reading about people's stories. I like learning about what people did in their lives, what they do for a living, how do people meet, because I'm a people person. I like learning about people. And so it's important to think about what do you gravitate towards, and that's a good indicator of your interest. And so then it's thinking about, okay, this is what I gravitate towards, how do I expand this and make this into sort of a work thing?
Yeah, and skills are, when we talk about skills, these could be soft skills, these could be technical skills, these could be more traits, but it's really, the most important piece to this is not skills that people seek you out for because you've been doing them for your entire career, but skills that you're motivated to use, and that's the key, is looking for skills that just come naturally. They have been with you probably through your whole life. They are transferable from one place to another. And when you can identify these skills, and then of course find work that needs these skills, you've found a good match. And so skill sets, and particularly the ones that motivate you, are really the ones we want to focus on.
And it's important to think about times in your life where you have engaged in activities where the time really flew because you were interested in doing it, and or you were utilizing skills that you were motivated to use. And the reason why it's important to think of those stories is not only to think about the fact that if you're making a transition and how to kind of promote yourself and brand yourself and say, I know I didn't have this title, however I have all the related experience, so sort of making those matches. But also to tell stories, to kind of be your own spokesperson if you don't have others to speak for you. To say, I realize that I love working in this type of role because when I worked at company XYZ, even though my role is as an analyst, I was very much involved with the planning committee for a garden. And then you can go and start talking about that. Now, how many of you have worked in roles where the work that you were doing, day in, day out, you didn't love, But when you think back on maybe the past few years, you think, boy, I wish I could go back to that one pocket of time where I was engaged in this one project. If I could do that every day, that would be great. How many of you? Great. And so if you're happy in the work that you do, wonderful. If you're not, it's important to take inventory of all those times. What does that mean? I mean, I remember when I worked in HR, the job I had while I was in grad school, I was in it for a little over 3 years, and I knew, 3 years, every week I had a report that I had to hand in. And every Friday at 4 o'clock, I was still working on that report. And my boss would say to me, you know, you can just fill it in as you go along throughout the week. And I thought to myself, I don't want to look at an Excel spreadsheet every day of the week. I'll save it. And so then I would sit there and everyone's leaving on a Friday and I'm still trying to plug away. So I knew that wasn't something that was an interest or a skill of mine, and it wasn't something that I was going to perhaps talk about as far as who I am and what I have to offer. Okay. Anyone have any thoughts or questions so far?
Yes.
Thank you for pointing that out, because I'm always asked, what do I want to do? And it's easier for me to ask, or it's easier for me to say what I don't want to do.
Yes.
It's so much easier to say I hate, I don't.
Yep.
So I'll say about 10 or 15 years ago, I stopped saying what I hated about my job because people are losing their jobs and someone would love to take my spot.
That's right.
So the moment that I changed that, I started liking my job and started being more appreciative of it. There are still aspects of it that I'm not fully satisfied with.
Right.
However, I think, getting this work value scale, put it in perspective. And when you said to tell my own story, that will make it easier for me to say what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, nothing in life is perfect, right? And so I think that all of us, we may have jobs we love, but there are certain parts of it that we wish we didn't have to do as much as we did it, but it doesn't overshadow the overarching sort of positivity of the role.
And many people will come and say, I've sent my resume to, 100 people and I'm just not getting a bite, or I'm getting the wrong bite, people that are coming to me for the jobs I don't want. And that's why it is important to, you want to showcase the skills and the interests and the values that you are looking for, so that the connection will be more in alignment with who you are. And so you will attract those things. If you put those out, then you will attract that. If you put out things, skills, interests that you have but you don't really want to use, then you're going to get that. So that is part of why this is so essential to understanding how to brand yourself.
And I think it's also a good exercise for anyone when you're in a role to identify the things that you don't like and that you like, so that what you can, when you are in tune to that, you can hear about or advocate for projects that are in line with what you like. So slowly but surely, you're building up your resume or your experiences to be more of what you enjoy as opposed to what you don't necessarily enjoy.
And so if you're not sure of what that title is, perhaps you can then explain, well, I want to be using these skills.
Right.
I'm very interested in doing X. Where can I do that? So when you're having an informational meeting or you are creating a pitch and you're trying to, explain in a very short period of time what it is you want to do, you could you don't have necessarily the title in mind, but you could at least express yourself and understand and explain what your values, interests, and skills are.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because your brand isn't a title. I mean, maybe it could be, I guess, but it's really, in its truest form, it's not a title. It's a description of who you are and what you have to offer and why. And it's using language that's applicable to the target audience or audiences that you want to serve. And the minute you start using specific titles, unless you have a very niche market and you have to say these couple titles, the more you start boxing yourself in and you close yourself out to opportunities, because you want people to hear descriptions, because then they can put you into their worldview and their world experience and see how you fit in their world. And then we're going to get to that in a little bit. But All right, so another aspect of your self-assessment is identifying your personality. And we, I do think that we all take some of our personal personalities, the people we are at home, into the people who we are at work, within reason. But you do want to think about that. How am I at home? How am I at work? What's my personality? And there are personality assessments out there, but essentially when you think about your personality, what you want to think about is how you get your energy. So do you get your energy from thinking and researching and analyzing and coming up with solutions? Or do you get your energy from interacting with others and supporting others and kind of with an outward focus? So think about that. Think about your experiences and where have you felt sort of blah. I mentioned I work part-time at a university, and this week is spring break. So there are no students around. And while it's nice and it's quiet and you can get things done, it's kind of sad. I like the students, I like the energy, right? The people around. You also want to think about, in terms of your personality, how do you take in information? So do you look at sort of the nuances, all the different particulars of things, or do you enjoy experiences where you're seeing the big picture? And again, as you're taking stock of all that, thinking about experiences you've had where you've exercised those skills. So if you're in a meeting and maybe you're planning an event, are you the person who's saying, okay, what's our budget? What's our timeline? Okay, where are we going to have this? What kind of food do we need to have? Who are we inviting? Or are you the person that says, if we have a big space, these are the things that we can do. And I have an idea for a theme, bigger picture. A really good exercise for that is the describe a leaf. So if you ask individuals who sort of see the nuances, describe a leaf, typically they'll say, they'll ask questions, what region are we talking about, what season are we in, that kind of thing. Whereas someone who sees the bigger picture will say it's veiny, it could be crispy, green or yellow. You sort of see the bigger picture. How do you make decisions? Do you make decisions based on data and facts and logic? Or are you making decisions based on how those decisions might impact others? And how do you interact with the outer world? Do you like to make decisions quickly? Do you like to explore your options? Are you very organized and systematic and have a nice schedule? Or do you like to see what happens? Or are you somewhere in between? And it's important to think about all these things because it will affect the kinds of roles that you have, the kinds of services you provide, and it will also affect the populations you serve. Because if you know your personality and you think, I really couldn't work with individuals who are extremely different from me, then perhaps you won't be promoting your brand in such a positive way. Maybe the experiences won't be so beneficial for both of you.
Which is what leads to why we added, be sure to check your attitude, because how you are seen, how you deal with the day-to-day, if you're not happy with the people you're working with, and that becomes vocal, that's part of your brand, mm-hmm. right? So we have to always keep ourselves in check, because that's how people are perceiving us.
And knowing that the fact that we all have this is what makes us all unique. We have these different personalities and we're on different scales of sort of all these things. It's also helpful to realize that and to have less of an attitude and more patience with others. Because it's not that they're doing things wrong, they're just doing things different.
Well, one exercise that Jen and I suggest to anyone who's really trying to understand how people see them and perceive them is, and I would encourage you all to do this, is to go out and ask people that know you and your work and how you are at work, the number one thing that they value most in you and your work. Now you can also gather this anecdotally or maybe through performance reviews that you've received in the past. But if you go and ask some people that know you and your work, and that feedback they give you is what you're known for. It's how they see you and and that's your brand in essence. That is really something that should, and we usually take that information and we'll put it directly into a summary at the top of a resume. Because it's, and maybe starting with the words known for or reputation for.
Sought after
for. Because, you know, and the more people you can get this information from, the better. And when you look at that information and compare it to what you believe about yourself, that truly is ultimately your brand.
Right, and Andrea's point, true about yourself. So you always want to validate this information and know where, you know, when you're asking others, kind of know who you're getting this information from. So if someone's sharing some info and it's not quite jiving, then you don't necessarily have to use it.
Right.
But typically we see that, we see themes across. So you ask people you currently work with if appropriate, people you've worked with in the past, friends and family members as well, so you can kind of get that overarching kind of like personality profile too, right? Because you do want your LinkedIn profile, your resume to reflect not only what you're capable of, but your personality as well. And to Andrea's point, we do put it in. I know you had that sort of interest in the beginning. You put it in your summary, put it in LinkedIn. And then from there, you start thinking about experiences you've had that support what it is that others are saying about you. So you have this consistent theme, this consistent brand, this consistent message going through your documents and your conversations. But what's interesting is that I don't think I've ever encountered when we ask clients to do this, and we ask from work, family, friends, what have you, I have never encountered differences. It's always similar feedback across the board. And it's the coolest thing, because then someone's reading it and they're saying, wow, first of all, it's such an ego boost. Wow, people like all these things about me. And then it all comes together. Oh yeah, I remember that time I was doing this, and I remember that time I put together this project, and it all starts coming up. And as Andrea mentioned, it's not about your resume, your messaging. It's not always just about everything you've done in your job description. It's finding those pieces of your work life that you want to continue doing. So it's not everything but the kitchen sink.
So I think we have a little exercise for you. We'd like you to take a moment to, on a blank sheet of paper,
Just turn it over when you're.
you could turn it over on a piece of paper to answer these 3 questions. So the first is, we want you to first start out with listing 5 words that describe yourself. You could just take a moment to do that. 5 words that describe you. Okay, and now, and as we'll always ask when we do exercises, don't think too hard, just the first things that come up, right? The next 5 words that people would use to describe you. And now, if you'll take a moment to write 5 words indicating how you would like to be perceived.
Okay.
Is
So.
some of them be the same?
And
that last word be the same?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all you. So.
How was this exercise for you? Just a quick and dirty.
So who wants to share the 5 words that describe you?
Can you describe yourself?
Yeah. How would you describe you?
Loyal, passionate, detailed, serious, and smart.
Okay. And what about how others would describe you?
Energetic, detailed, thoughtful, smart. Am I allowed to say this? Attractive.
Sure. Go for it. And then number 3, 5 words indicating how you would like to be perceived. You mentioned you were similar.
Does it mean that you're not, or just that I want people?
How you want. Yeah. So it could be you already know that people are perceiving this, or what you aspire for.
Available to help, organized, committed, smart. I don't know how to say it. Together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great. So when looking at these, there are a couple things to think about. One is, or to do. One is, after you've asked others for feedback on you, see how these things match up, right? And if you find that the would like to be perceived, that you're not being perceived in that way, then it's time to think about what do I do to be perceived that way? What are some things that I could be doing? And we'll talk about resources for sort of like assessing the market, and that's certainly an area. You may already know that, you might already know that there are some things you can be doing in order to change or adjust the way others see you. And it's just a question of how do you go about doing it, or can you do it, or are you willing to do it? Because I think we were just talking about this the other day, clients we work with, some are extremely motivated, and we work with them and we give them work and assignments, and they're raring to go, and they come back and they have all the work done and they push ahead. Then we have other clients who say they're raring to go, we're working, we give them assignments, we meet at another time maybe, and then we don't hear from them, and then a year later they reach out to us again to say, I think I'm really ready this time. So it's assessing how ready are you to, if you're looking to adjust your brand. There's a difference between creating the brand and adjusting, right? You may already have a brand with the way people see you. But also in terms of how you want to be perceived, is that a reality? Is that realistic? Because I think sometimes people want to be certain things because they think they should be a certain way. And so it's going back to your values and your interests and your skills to say, is this really how I want to be perceived, or is there something else for me?
How many people had a challenge with number 2, coming up with how people would describe them? Okay, and that's, all this is normal, it's not everybody has it, that it doesn't come to everybody so quickly, and so maybe that's an indication that maybe it is time to, start thinking about that, and I think reaching out to some that you feel comfortable with, that know you and your work, might be a good idea, because you'll get some good information that will help you in creating your brand.
Yes.
Is your personal brand though the intersection of 1 and 2?
Yes,
it is.
How does 3 fall into it then?
So so how you are perceived is essentially, that is your brand, how others see you, right? And so it's what are you putting out there. So if you describe yourself in a way that differs from how others see you, then you're not getting the messaging right. So it is an intersection. It is how do you see yourself? Based on that, what are you saying about yourself? And in terms of your actions, it's not just what you're writing down on paper, it's also walking that walk. And based on that, what are others' perceptions of you? Now, if people perceive you in a way that's extremely surprising, ask them for examples, or even not surprising, ask them for examples. Why, I wonder what makes you say that about me, right? I think that you have it all together. Well, what makes you say that? Provide me with an example. Or I think that you're super smart. Why do you think that? Why do you think that? Tell me more. Give me an example. Because I think it's helpful. It's data for you, and it may even help you think about other experiences you've had that didn't even come to mind, that you can then incorporate into your resume, into storytelling, and that sort of thing. So we've kind of been mentioning this over and over again, really just thinking back on experiences. Ideally, you do want to take stock of the things that you've enjoyed, take stock of the things you haven't enjoyed. But when we say the word achievement, it doesn't have to be sort of doing a marathon or winning the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It could really just be something that made you proud or that you enjoyed. It's a positive story. And so you want to take stock of your achievements. What experiences have you had that you really enjoyed? I mentioned earlier that I worked in campus recruiting and then made a transition into career counseling. And part of that transition and what sparked it was not only was I not getting joy out of the work I was doing, but I also was exposed to a whole different career and environment. I was on college campuses, meeting with students, and I found that the campus environment, the energy was really in tune with who I was. Being able to develop relationships with these students and guide them and advise them to to an extent, which was part of the frustration. I couldn't guide them and advise them too much. I was a recruiter, but that really left an imprint on me, and so I explored that more. And so those experiences brought me happiness. And so I wondered, what else? How else can I apply those interests and the values that brought me happiness? I felt like I was developing these great relationships, and that's part of the brand. So when I went for my first interview in career counseling, and the interviewer said to me, the director of the Career Center at the time said, why are you interested in this role? I was able to give an example or give a story that was very true, very meaningful to me, and I could see on their faces that they knew that I was really interested in this role, that I really wanted to do this work, that it was very important to me to get the job. And ultimately I did get the job. And so when you can speak from a place of authenticity, it makes all the difference. Sure.
Yeah, but what time is it?
7:30.
So we have a little bit
Yeah.
of time. We'll do another exercise with you. Think of one achievement that you feel most proud of, or it doesn't have to be most, but proud of, and you've enjoyed the process of, and just think about that. And then if you could write about it using this situation, what was the situation you were in, what was the action that you took, and then what was the result? And then if you could put that together in a statement. Does that make sense?
And do you want to do the takeaway? And so the takeaway is something that, this is sort of like how you would respond to an interview question, situation, action, result for interviewing. The takeaway is important because it differentiates you from others to talk a little bit about what market left on you, or what you learned from that experience, or how you've taken that experience and applied it to future situations. And so it shows growth, it obviously shows maturity, but it also supports your brand. What I took from that is I really enjoyed this, or what I took from that is that we all sort of have this one thing, or whatever. But it enables you to show this, again, a consistent message of the different takeaways that you've had in your life and how it's brought you to this point. So take a few minutes to.
Who would like to share? Just get one volunteer. Just one person.
One brave soul.
Okay, I'll
All right, great.
It's relevant because it just happened recently. I participated in a New York Shakespeare sonnet project to produce a short film based on Shakespeare's 50-minute sonnet. I was given a location, an actor, the sonnet, and 3 hours to shoot and produced it. I planned extensively for this since I only had 3 hours to shoot it. The result was a highly entertaining story that told the true story of the sonnet that most viewers understood, because Shakespeare is hard to understand. Yeah. What I took away from it was that it took a lot of planning, and I was very good at doing that and telling the story of something most people would not be able to understand, which was Shakespeare. But I also realized that not everyone will love it, so bringing it on to something else. But that was mine.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah. And that takeaway, right? Those two things are essentially transferable skills that you can apply to a variety of audiences, industries, depending on who you want to serve. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just to piggyback on what she said, I think it also showed that you was able to work under pressure and, meet a deadline.
That's right.
And that might be something you would put in your summary, right?
Yeah.
Or, whether it's LinkedIn or your resume, or if somebody asks, tell me about yourself, or describe, those are the words you can pull from just thinking about that experience. And then you could say, well, let me give you an example of that. And there you go. Right? So you could paint the picture for someone. So, if you're gonna say that you have these skills and that you can work under pressure, then let's prove it, right?
You say it and you
that's,
show it. Yeah. Thank you for volunteering. So this, where do you see yourself? This is sort of assessing the market, putting yourself out there. So this is twofold. So when we talk about these things, it's not only gathering data for what are some areas that you could be targeting based on who you believe you are in terms of your brand, but at the same time or afterwards, it's also resources that you can utilize to push your brand out there once you know your target audience or audiences. So it's twofold. So when we talk about these things, think a little bit about data collection to see who wants me, who needs me, and who wants me, who needs me, and then also resources for pushing out your message to people who want you and need you. So how many of you are on LinkedIn? Who's on LinkedIn? Okay, so most of you. Okay. LinkedIn is a great resource for researching what others do, right? Benchmarking other people's profiles, other company profiles, looking to see what's the verbiage that people and organizations are using about themselves or their organization. It's a great way to identify ways in which you can get to the point of how you want to be perceived. So in other words, perhaps there are individuals based on their profiles, they've worked in a variety, they've sort of worked their way up or across in a variety of roles. It gives you an idea about how can I go about doing that in a way that's realistic for me, based on other people's career paths. It's also a way for you to research based on your values and perhaps if there are certain causes that you have, what are some organizations out there that fall within those industries or causes or areas to do a little bit more research. It's also a great way to reach out to people to ask them questions, right? So what is it that you do? How do you go about doing what it is that you do? What are the industries that typically need what it is that you do? And also the groups in LinkedIn, being able to read the discussions, contribute to discussions, and we'll get to that.
And when you think of LinkedIn and how it relates to your brand, it's thinking about, making sure that it's keyword rich, so that your profile, meaning like finding words that are relevant to the career or the industry that you want to be in, and making sure that your LinkedIn profile has those key terms in it so that you come up higher in the search, right? In one search when they type in keywords that you're found. And by the way, for those of you, this is sort of an aside, but if you don't have LinkedIn, you should very much consider getting a LinkedIn profile, because when you have a LinkedIn profile, you're also, when someone Googles you, you're automatically going to come up very high in the search, because LinkedIn in itself provides you with that SEO, search
Especially
engine
when you have a picture.
Optimization, right. But that, yes, so thinking about the picture you're using, thinking about the audiences and who you're trying to attract or who you're speaking to. It's unlike a resume. A resume you can, craft a few different variations of a resume depending on who you're sending it to. But for a LinkedIn profile, you have one profile that needs to speak to a variety of audiences. So you need to be very strategic about how you're writing it. And, thinking about your summary and how you're going to, and many people don't use a summary or don't have a summary. And you should, because it's free real estate. This is the opportunity for you to express yourself and who you are.
And that's what differentiates you, makes your brand, by the words that you're using to talk about yourself.
And it's more of a narrative than a resume. So you could use the personal pronoun I. You could, if you're a career changer, you could explain that. If you are a career re-enterer, you could explain that. If you, you have a particular job, but you're more than that job, maybe you have some other hobbies or interests that you also want to showcase, that's the time to explain it, right? So, when you think of LinkedIn, it really is, it's an incredibly important piece to the whole picture of your brand.
And
Yes.
thinking about the groups, just want to touch on that, once you've identified sort of your
yes.
brand, joining groups that represent your brand, engaging in discussions in groups. So not just posting events or things that you're hosting in the groups, but actually answering people's questions that they pose within the groups, within the discussions. Maybe posting articles about things that have to do with that particular group's industry. Also following certain companies or organizations that sit within the industries that you represent. So following them on LinkedIn.
And not following others that might be either controversial or, you know, might, again, you thinking of your brand. And also, and groups as well. And the other thing is when you're posting, you know, just like you would in a Facebook
On
page,
the
you're
homepage.
posting on the homepage an update. You know, what we're seeing a lot of, which we would not recommend, are more personal posts.
On LinkedIn.
You know, LinkedIn is not Facebook, so you really need to be mindful of what you're posting. Is the content, you know, is it professional? Is it, you know, related to what your professional interests are, or is it more personal? And you need to, that's again part of your brand and how you're being perceived.
Yeah, he's a student of mine. I mean, he's a second-year student, so he's just starting out. But he's identified that he wants to go into finance and he wants to go into sustainable investing, whatever that is. And so he does a lot of research on this. And the college where I work, they had a big event where there was a guest speaker. And so my student did a lot of research on him, researched some things that he's been involved in. And so when it came to Q&A time, he stood up and asked a question. And the question just happened to be extremely relevant to, well, he knew it was going to be relevant to this guest speaker, but extremely relevant because the guest speaker was about to publish a book that was on that topic. And so based on that question, because he did the research, he knew what his interest was, and he asked this question, he put himself out there. This guest speaker was so impressed with him that he asked him if he could, he brought him over to the dean of the school that was hosting this event, and he said, I want to get a picture with this student, and I want to see if we can talk offline more. The three of them took a picture. So my student came in and said, how do I post this on my LinkedIn homepage, and how do I hashtag? And so because he's starting to create his brand. So he went on his homepage, he uploaded the picture, and we just hashtagged the devil out of it. And, you know, sustainability, investing, and, you know, the name of the school, all these different things, so that if people are searching underneath that hashtag, his image will come up. And so that's, again, thinking about ways in which to bring traffic to you through that way.
You had a question back there.
Yeah, just a question. I think you touched on this earlier, where if you, for either LinkedIn or even your resume, saying that I said I'm a seasoned, or I'm an executive assistant or something, is that putting the title? Is that pigeonhole?
Yes. Unless you want to be an executive assistant. Yeah.
Well, what pigeonholes you is when you put your exact title,
Yeah.
right? Because that's the default heading headline in LinkedIn, and so we would encourage you to write.
Go up and
If
change
you're going to write
the words that are
executive
underneath your
assistant,
name, that's whatever the last position is, or whatever the first position is in your profile, that goes up under your name. You could edit that and change it to something completely different.
so
And in
maybe
your
a
summary,
few
describe
different
yourself.
areas. Maybe it's executive assistant. Maybe it's a particular industry that you're interested in, or, you know, and you don't. And it doesn't have to be. Some people will put, you know, personality traits. You know, it could be author, you know, lecturer, visionary, you know, environmental sustainability, you know, all, you know, as their title, because you remember you're speaking to multiple audiences.
Yeah. So we mentioned informational networking meetings. Certainly you can talk with individuals, find people through LinkedIn, any professional associations you belong to. If you're, you know, perhaps you're developing your brand and you've identified certain professions or industries that you want to be associated with or are associated with, joining those associations within financial reason. And going to those events, reaching out to people through the member directory in these professional associations to talk with people, ask them questions, get advice, or even ask them, what trends are you seeing? These are the key skills. These are the strengths I have. What advice do you have for me in terms of where I should be targeting, right? So talking to people who've been doing it for a while, especially if you're making a transition, so getting advice from others. And in terms of the professional associations, once you have identified your brand and you sort of understand what skills and resources you can provide, a great way is to partner up with a local chapter of your association, offer some sort of service, or work on that committee. So again, letting other people know that this is who you are, this is what you do. So whether it's running a workshop, or if you want to transition from executive assistant to a marketing person, being on the committee and being the marketing person. So the more you can engage in those activities, the better. So in terms of, we already talked a little bit about asking others what makes you different. But I think that's a nice question too, to ask. Not just what am I the go-to person for, what do you value in me, but what makes me different? Why do you come to me to talk to me about certain things and not the person who does the same thing 4 desks over? What is it about me? Maybe it's, you have discretion, or I really think that you're the subject matter expert on, SQL and Visual Basic. I don't know. But, sort of asking that, why me? What makes me different? And then what you want to do is conduct your own personal SWOT analysis. So it really is a marketing campaign, right? When people are going into, putting together a marketing campaign and identifying, these are our products or services, this is our audience, how do we get it to the audience, how do we get our message across? Same thing when it comes to you. You are the product. So thinking about the SWOT analysis, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You can start it out now, but as you get more data, you can do it again. Because maybe you're learning that there are certain things that you don't necessarily need, certain skills you don't need, or perhaps there are other industries that you didn't even consider that are closer to home. So what we'd like you to do, just within the next 5 minutes or so, is start working on your SWOT analysis, taking stock of the strengths that you have. If you have a specific career in mind, or if you know that this is the career you want to be in, but you want to get to that next level, thinking about the characteristics of that career in relation to the SWOT analysis in yourself. So start working on that. All right, so I know you're still working on it, but in the interest of time, what we would like you to do with the SWOT analysis is you always want to fact check this. Are the weaknesses and strengths that you're saying, are those accurate? Are you missing something? And so that's why it is important to engage the help of others as you think about your strengths. Or talking to individuals who you trust to say, I conducted an analysis of myself and these are the areas that I think I need to work on, or my weaknesses. Would you agree? And maybe they would say yes, or maybe they'd say, actually no, you were doing this here and I thought you were great at it, because we are our own worst critics. And the SWOT analysis you'll adjust that as you conduct more research, if you are indeed going into a different or related career, one where you might need to gather more information from talking to others, reading others' job descriptions, reading companies' job descriptions, reading others' profiles, to get a more realistic analysis. But the purpose of the SWOT analysis is to ultimately see your unique proposition, and to look at your strengths and your opportunities, and to say what populations really could utilize who I am, and staying away from those threats and not utilizing those weaknesses. So thinking about the experiences you have that utilize your strengths, your personality, your values. Does that make sense?
So we're coming to an end. So really, it's very important to just take stock of your online presence and how you're seen. And I think we mentioned a little bit of this earlier, but when you Google yourself, what do you find? Hopefully it's just the LinkedIn profile that comes up, and maybe some things that you might find that would come from professional experiences. I think you had a hand?
Yeah, so I'm named after my mother. So when I'm Googled, or I've Googled myself, I learned recently that my mother had gotten into trouble and was harassing someone.
Oh.
How do I
Right.
make sure that I'm separated
Right.
from her?
Well, one way, do you have a middle name?
I do.
So one way is to, on your resume, on
Put that
LinkedIn,
everywhere.
put your middle initial.
Okay.
Yeah. And then just make sure that you are in more places online than your mother is. So in other words, LinkedIn, Facebook, but we'll get to that in a sec, but Facebook, if you have a blog, if you have any kind of projects that you've worked on where perhaps you've been quoted and that's hidden away in the World Wide Web somewhere. You can link it back to your LinkedIn profile and put that media in there. The more of an online presence you have, the better. I mean, I think we all have that. I
Yeah,
mean, my
many of
name
us have
is, I get, there's some artist that comes up, and you know, every time when I wanted to create my LinkedIn URL, I couldn't because she had it, you know. And so, but yeah, I would put your middle initial in everywhere.
I think we mentioned Facebook. You know, just it's be careful of what you're posting. I mean, we of course would tell college students this all the time. I mean, these are, you know, the information you're putting out there is going to be there forever. And so you really have to be mindful of what you're posting, and employers absolutely can do background checks and check social media and make decisions based on that.
And it's not just, you know, you might think, well, I belong to some private groups on LinkedIn that are just for my town or whatever, or whatever it may be, and, right, on Facebook. And so if I post there, it's private, so it doesn't matter. It does matter because some of these Facebook groups have thousands of members, and it's a small world. And you might be at an event where someone recognizes you from a post you made, and they are now thinking of you not as the brand, not as how you want to be perceived, but as how what you're putting out there to the world. So I mean, in the digital age, you're always being watched, even though we're not consciously watching each other necessarily. But when we tend to remember negative things more for a longer period of time than we do positive things.
And then, you know, making sure you do clean it up, but getting active, meaning you should use, I mean, social media has a very positive role as well and a good purpose. And so you should get yourself out there because you will look more current, you know, especially those of us who might be facing, you know, ageism. You know, yeah, I think someone agrees. But yes, it's so when you have a presence, a social media presence, and you have that LinkedIn profile, it does make you appear to be more current and up on, you know, the latest and greatest.
And making sure everything is clean. So you have a LinkedIn URL. You don't just have the URL that LinkedIn gave you.
Mm-hmm.
You have a Gmail account,
That's
not
right.
an AOL or a Yahoo account.
That's true. For email.
You don't have a shared family email. You have your own personal email.
The picture on LinkedIn is not you and your family. It's of you, professional you.
In regards to that with Facebook, like I know there's some people in my industry where they just have like, it's like a business Facebook page for
Yes.
them as opposed to like their family.
Yeah.
Is that something that you recommend also? Or?
I mean, if you have your own business,
Right.
certainly you can have both. You know, one can be for your business and one can be your personal, certainly. Especially if you have, you know, different email addresses, you can do that. Yeah.
If you're starting a second career, a business, what other social media should you be on besides, let's say, Facebook and LinkedIn?
Twitter, certainly.
Maybe Instagram. I guess it depends on your
Yeah, on
business too.
business, yeah.
It's more of a visual, right?
Yes.
Yes, Instagram, absolutely.
Blogs.
Mm-hmm. Creating a blog.
Oh, creative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, you know, with your Instagram, if you have a professional Facebook page, your blog, all of those sites or addresses can be put onto your LinkedIn profile so people can find you in that way too.
Oh, you can list all of those
Yep.
right there.
Mm-hmm.
And just being consistent in each, you know, just thinking about each as a reflection of you. And then and finally, I think, just to wrap up, it's a lot of, you know, your brand is always, it's similar to your resume and your LinkedIn profile, which is a living document. You are always evolving, your brand is always evolving, and if you feel like you haven't spent enough time, or maybe you're not really sure what it is at this point, it's never too late to start it and to think about it from here on in, and just to be a little bit more mindful about how you're presenting yourself in person, online, on paper, you know, and when you're speaking, whether in a networking event or a social outing, and being mindful of, like, you know, how you're portrayed and how and perceived and what you're saying. You know, it's just keeping yourself in check. so when you know these information and how people perceive you, and when you know yourself and are able to better articulate that and better able to identify when you're in the right place, you know, these are all the aspects of your brand, and getting that word out, you know, getting it out there through these various mediums.
So, thank you. Oh, yes.
From what you said about creating your brand, and then if you would like to have promotional materials,
Yes.
what would be the most important elements of your brand to put on the promotional materials?
Well, I mean, if you have a logo and you create a logo that you believe represents in terms of the color, the look, the feel, if it represents you.
Maybe a tagline or a mission.
Right, certainly
Yeah.
a mission statement. If you have been doing some things on the side in relation to your new business, testimonials, but also incorporating, you know, doing the assessment for yourself, so when you describe your work and how you provide services for others, what it is that makes you different. Yes.
Just a question. When you write your bio, do you suggest that we do it in the third person? Or, I mean, when I do presentations, we're always told, you know, to submit our proposals in third person. So I do that. And the second part of my question is when you are a small business and when you are just an individual, and you do not have employees, when you write about your business, about us, do you say I or do you say we?
It depends on how you want your business to be perceived.
Okay.
So I was actually looking at someone who I know, she has a company, and it's literally her and a part-time employee, but she wants people to think that it's a bigger company. And so she says, we provide, right? So it's just how do you want to be perceived?
But in terms of that question about third person, I think you'll often see executive bios written in third person, and that's fine and that's normal. But I wouldn't write and you'll see sometimes LinkedIn summaries or profiles will be written in third person. We believe it sort of separates you from who you are. I mean, I think our advice would be to use first person personal pronouns,
On LinkedIn.
I, on LinkedIn. An executive bio is something different, so you could speak in third person, or people that are more executive level.
Right, certain industries or levels, that's situational, but for the most part on LinkedIn, it is more first person. Okay, so last question, because I know that we have to wrap up. Yes.
I know you were saying with LinkedIn that you don't want to use that AOL or Yahoo.
Well,
You
in
wanna
general, you don't want to have a Yahoo or AOL, not just LinkedIn.
Okay.
Because only your first connections on LinkedIn can see know your email address. The rest of the world typically doesn't. But when you have an AOL or an old, like sort of a dated email address on your resume, it really just gives the impression that you're dated.
Right, I heard that
Yeah.
you should have a Gmail.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I know you said last, I'm sorry, but on that, what if you have like a Montclair alumni email?
That's fine, but I mean, think about how's that differentiating you from who you are and what you do, right? So you may want to have a plain vanilla, unless you're, I mean, obviously if you're working here.
at Montclair, yeah.
But
Yeah. So thank you for your time and attention and questions, and we appreciate it.